G'day everyone, my name is Mark and this is the start of the Purple Coloured Glasses channel, an AFL Freo focused channel, and I'll be starting with my ladder predictions for the 2022 AFL season. So I'm going to start from the bottom, work my way up. So the team I've got taking out the spoon this year is North Melbourne. And sorry North Melbourne fans, it was really a toss-up between yourselves and Adelaide, I thought. But seeing Tarrant go out, backline probably looks a bit shaky in my eyes. A young midfield. I think he'll look good with Greenwood coming across from Gold Coast. I think that's a good pickup. And could see yourselves snatch a couple of games, particularly if the couple of teams above you have an injury crisis. Like West Coast already got a few out. If Hawthorn or Collingwood have a really bad year, I could see you jumping above the spoon spot. But I think you're the favourite right now, unfortunately. Moving on to 17th, we've got Adelaide. They weren't that impressive last year. They blooded a few youth, and they've got Thorpe. I think they'll be decent, but I think they're still going through that rebuilding phase. I think Laird and Searsman are both out for the start of the year. That's a big hit to them. So I see them finishing near the bottom again. 16th, got Hawthorn. So I've bracketed the teams into 4 brackets. So Adelaide and Melbourne, definitely bottom bracket in my eyes. This next group of teams are in that next bracket. So I think the base group of players, they're too good to finish last. But they're still going through this rebuilding phase. And so with Hawthorn, they got Sam Mitchell in as the new coach. They've still got some experienced players like Mitchell and O'Meara. Got Sicily coming back from injury. So they'll be a good side. They'll beat some teams, but I don't see them going anywhere near finals. So I've got them finishing 16th. 15th, I've got West Coast. So over here in Perth, there's already a bit of bloodletting going on, and fans thinking that West Coast will finish with the spoon. As much as I'd love that, I don't think that'll actually happen. You look at their players they've got out. They've got a lot of quality out. But Perth's a good home advantage. A lot of teams don't like coming over here and playing them. They'll get some of those guys back from injury, and they'll do enough to finish outside that bottom 2. They can move outside the bottom 4 if things go their way. Like if Shuey comes back and doesn't do another hamstring, Yo gets on the field, Darling gets over his vaccine and foot injuries. They could have a decent back end of the year, but I don't see them playing finals. 14th, I've got Collingwood. It's a bit similar to Hawthorn. I thought last year they were still a decent side on paper before Bucks got the sack, but they just didn't seem to gel. I think the players going out in the off-season like Treloar and Phillips, their salary cap stuff was just a bit of a basket case. And now they've got Craig McRae in as the new coach. Could have a decent year. They're a bit hard to pick, Collingwood. They've got Dacos in, so they've got the 2 Dacos boys there now. But yeah, I still see them as probably developing, but they could be a bit of a surprise packet because they've still got some good players there on the list. Gold Coast in as 13th. So I thought Gold Coast could actually push a bit this year, but unfortunately with Ben King doing his ACL, I think it'll be tough for them. I think they'll beat West Coast in round 1. But I think it's a bit similar story to the last couple of years, is they'll give it a good crack for the first couple of months, but I just don't see them putting together that late season form that's required to push into finals. So I've got them above quite a few of those other teams. I still think they're a bit further along their development journey if you wanted to compare them to someone like Adelaide and North Melbourne, with guys like Lukosius. Rao should have a better year this year. I think last year he was still sort of coming back from his injury and didn't really recover from that. So I think they'll be relatively well placed. They played without a ruck pretty much all last year. I think people forget that. So I think that's the sort of second bracket of teams. I think Gold Coast and Collingwood are probably best placed to push into this next bracket. And so this next bracket is between teams 12 to 4. And I think all these teams could play finals this year. So at 12th, I've got St Kilda. I think they're probably the most flaky team out of all these, where on their day they look amazing, and then on their bad day you've got every media pundit pulling them apart on their defensive running and how Brad Hill's not good enough or they're not giving him the ball. It just seems like their best team on paper isn't as good compared to the other teams, but when they actually put it all together, they can be quite damaging. They've got Max King as well, who's probably starting to come into a bit of form at the back end of last year. He's not an easy matchup for a lot of tools, but I just don't see their midfield getting on top of a lot of teams. So I've got them finishing 12th. Bit of a surprise here in 11th. I've got Sydney. So I think last year Sydney had a really surprising year. To put the Freo lens on, I think sort of Sydney, Carlton, Fremantle, they're all sort of that similar development profile. And Sydney's youth last year sort of just came on, hit the ground running, but they had some senior players have some decent years as well. Like Luke Parker really tore up the comp. And do I see them going and having that level of success again this year? I don't. I think a few teams are going to figure them out, play a bit tighter. There was they got so much outside run last year, they were just cutting teams up, and I thought surely the coaches are going to go to work and clamp Sydney down, and didn't really happen. They had a bit of a flat spot there when Hickey went out injured, but they played quite well. They're very close in that final against GWS and got dumped out, but yeah, this year I think they'll have a bit of a second year syndrome for some of those. I know some of them have been in the system longer than 2 years, but I think it'll be a bit tougher for them this year. In 10th, I've got GWS. So GWS probably the hardest team to pick. They'll go knock off the top two teams, and then they'll lose 3 in a row against the bottom sides. They're such a hard team to pick. Probably seen all the Ferrari memes and things like that. They've got some really good players on the list, and can definitely be playing finals. But I just think they're still a bit inconsistent. Very hard to pick them, and I've got them finishing outside the finals. 9th. Look away, Bombers fans, because I've put you in the dreaded 9th position. I think last year they were a bit fortunate that there were some teams that are a bit inconsistent below them. So Freo kicked so many behinds against the Bombers and really should have beat them, and that's probably the trade-off in who plays finals. And we played our second game against Carlton, which was meant to be at home. We got done over by poor scoring, and Carlton lost a bunch of games that probably should have won on paper. And I'm predicting Freo and Carlton to be a lot better this year or play to their potential, which would see Essendon slide down. They did have some good players come on last year, like Parrish. But I just don't... Nothing really sort of stands out when I look at Essendon's team. I think across the board, they're solid. I don't look at their midfield or defense or their forwards and go wow, they're amazing. But I think they're probably top 6, top 8 in every area. So they don't have a glaring weakness in their team, to be fair. So they could push up this year. 8th, I've got Geelong. So I think I really wanted to make Geelong finish outside the top 8 and probably put the Bombers in, but every year people are tipping Geelong to fall off the cliff, and I really hope they do fall off the cliff eventually. I'm just sick of seeing them play finals every single year, but I've got them finishing 8th, so they'll play finals this year, but I don't think they'll go very deep. Cardinia Park's a very good advantage for them. They'll get the sort of 12, 13 wins required, but I don't think they're going to do much damage. In 7th, probably hurts me to put Carlton here. They could finish a bit higher. If you look on paper, they've got a really good team. They've brought in Chera from Freo. It was a big loss seeing Chera go over to the Blues. It's even worse because they seem like they play their grand final against us every time they play us. They got Hewitt in, who's a good addition from Sydney. On paper, they could finish 4th. They're a good team. I don't think they touch those top sides I've got. I think losing what's his name? Tall bloke down back. Liam Jones. He's going to be big out. If you look at the stats last year, Liam Jones and Wiedering had the most one-on-one contests, and they won such a high percentage of them. And it's not really a sustainable way of playing in your defence. So they could actually get blown out of the water. Now Voss has brought in what looks to be a more forward half play, similar to the style that Port Adelaide use, where you're locking the ball in your forward half and you're defending from your front end. So they could leak a lot less points this year. But that's my one sort of question mark over Carlton, is their back line. Like their midfield and their forward line looks quite good. So Freo, this is my purple coloured glasses coming on here. I wanted to put them in fourth spot, but I was trying to be a little bit realistic here. Freo, probably one of those teams I've seen people put all over the place. I've seen people put them in their top 8. I've seen people put them in sort of 12th, 13th position. I think a lot of people don't really know where Freo is going to sit. I think a big part of that is our availability. So we've had so many injuries over the last 2 or 3 years. We've almost got a fully fit list in the first time since I can remember, which has suddenly created a lot of depth. So we've got guys like Joel Hamling who look like they're not going to play for the first couple of weeks of football. Puts pressure on guys like Griffin Logue and Brendan Cox to actually play well, because Joel Hamling's just knocking on the door. He's a good defender. You look in the midfield. Unfortunately, Tucker got injured. I think Tucker can be that player that's a bit inside, bit outside. He's got the gut running. He's in that sort of 25, 26, I think, years old. Is there any player, I think, from that draft who's still on the list? Unfortunately, he's done a hamstring, so he'll be coming back from that. Fife's coming back from the shoulder. Mundy, I watched the last game, unfortunately, against West Coast. He does look like he's off the pace a little bit. Last year, we relied on Mundy a lot. Hopefully, he doesn't have to play all 22 games this year. I hope they sort of not phase him out, because I think he's a club champion. I love David Mundy. But if we're needing 22 games from David Mundy, I think that says something more about the youth and the younger guys coming through. It'd be good to see Erasmus get some games. I really rate O'Driscoll, having seen a bit of him this year, so I think he can be that sort of contested in and under player. Will Brodie, similar in that mould. The disposal's probably not as clean. Big part of this jumping up to 6th is we need big years from Caleb Sarong and Andrew Brayshaw. I think Darcy can go to a next level, but if he just puts out the same year as he did in the back half of last year, I think that'll be good in the sort of centre of the park. But then up front, well, we just need to get a full year out of Taberner and Lobb. These blokes just go down injured way too often, and you can see when they actually have a bit of consistency and they're playing together, they do well. It's just they'll sort of get 3 or 4 games, then go down, and they then don't play with each other, don't form the connection. I think it's a good pickup moving out Hale and getting in Jamie Graham from West Coast. I think West Coast has had very good forward line dynamics and connection. And I was starting to see a bit of that. I think it'll take a while to gel. You want to see guys like Sam Switkowski stay in the park, Frederick, and then you want to see Sam Sturt really get over his injuries. So that's why I don't think I can see us doing a lot of damage. I think this will be a good platform for the next year or the year after. But I do see a lot of benefits. And this is clearly with the Fremantle glasses. You can make very similar arguments to what I'm making now about teams like Carlton and Essendon and GWS and Sydney and stuff. So moving on to 5th, I've got Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide haven't actually been that convincing in their practice matches. It's not hard. It's very hard to take away form in the practice matches. But then towards the back of last year as well, some of the guys just looked a bit banged up, like Boak and Gray, Dixon. They just weren't having as much of an impact as I thought they'd had in previous years. So I think they'll struggle a little bit this year. I think they're a bit of a flat track bully as well. And I think some of those weaker teams are going to be a bit stronger this year, so I think they'll find it a bit more challenging. But I do have them just a little bit above some of these other teams. Then in 4th, I've got Richmond. So last year I thought they were having an okay year, but they had a lot of injuries. And I think they've been written off a bit in terms of they're done. Cochin's a bit too old. Dusty's come back from a fairly serious, I think it was kidney injury. How will Rewalt go? I still think they've got enough for 1, maybe 2 more rolls of the dice. I think they'll end up in a similar boat to West Coast, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure how much like good youth they've actually got, and they'll have to drop down the ladder a bit. So that's my sort of third bracket of teams. So between 12th and 4th, I actually think there could be a lot of movement in those sides. So if like one of these teams gets a big injury crisis, or like a big bout of COVID, for example, goes through and takes out a bunch of players for Freo for like 6 weeks, like suddenly that impacts the ladder quite a lot. And then the top three. So I think these three teams really are apart from everyone else. So third, I've got Brisbane. I think they'll struggle a little bit, missing Hipwood. But I think they'll still easily finish third. You get Rayner back. It's hard coming back and having a huge impact off an ACL. I still think that'll somewhat mitigate the Hipwood loss. Remember last year they had to, I think, play away 3 weeks in a row or 4 weeks in a row, and they started 0-3. I think they'll start much better this year. In second is the Dogs, and I've seen a lot of people put the Dogs in their top 4, and I was a bit nervous putting them here because last year they finished 5th, and when they won their flag they finished 7th. I'm not sure Beveridge has actually got a top 4 finish with the Bulldogs yet, so it's one I feel a bit nervous about in terms of, will they actually finish there? They've got a stacked midfield, but they're sort of like key position players aren't like head and shoulders above other people. Norton is a very good contested mark, but his finishing isn't great. I think they'll miss Bruce because I think he's a great foil for Norton. So I think the Dogs will still be good. And their midfield is pretty much the best. It's better than every other team, maybe bar Melbourne. And then Melbourne, who I've got as finishing first, and actually I reckon they'll go back-to-back this year. They've got the clear best team in my mind when they're fit and available, and they've got the belief through the team. And I think that was the issue with Melbourne in the last couple of years, is it was between the ears. Like, they just didn't think they could win, or they just didn't mentally back up. So they'd have a good victory, and then next week they'd go stink it up against someone in the bottom 6. And I think winning that flag last year, they don't have the monkey on the back anymore in terms of it's been like decades since we've won a flag. They've got good players on every line. You got Lever and May. Tomlinson was really good before he went down with an ACL, and he's back. In the centre again, you got Gawn and Petrarca and Clayton Oliver. And then at forward, their forward line's probably like their weakest line, but it's still quite strong. You got a medium forward like Fritsch kicking 5 goals in a grand final. Like, that's pretty good effort. But I think they're very dynamic team, so I reckon they'll go back to back this year. And I think it's more just because not only they're a good team at the moment, but I don't think there's a lot of challenges to them. Like, I really only see the Doggies and Brisbane being teams that can challenge them when they're also at full strength. A lot of the other teams I don't really think could get near Melbourne on their day. So that's my ladder for the year. I'll be putting out another video later this week to go through my tips for the week. I'll try to get that out Monday, Tuesday, because of the round starting on Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to a big round of footy. Alright, thanks all for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll be putting out at least one video a week to talk through the Freo games. I'll be primarily focusing about Freo, review the round that was, and then preview the game coming up for the week. Thanks everyone, catch you later.